Cool. Hello and welcome to the IWFM Turbulent Times webinar series. My name is Arbe Felipe and it is my pleasure as a committee member to host this episode brought to you by the IWFM London region. This session will last about 15 minutes and forms part of a spotlight series on leading FMs across the capital, where we look to discuss the FM career journey, share insights and learning opportunities across the industry. Today, I am joined by Richard Gregg, who is the Operating Director at Rugby Union Club Saracens, based in London and Hendon. And welcome, Richard, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it's my understanding that you've been in the industry for over 15 years. To kick things off, would you describe to us what your day-to-day role looks like at Saracens?
Yeah, no problem. Probably before I get into what I do, I'll just talk a little bit about Saracens as a rugby club. We've been a professional rugby club, for those of you unaware, since 1999. We used to play our rugby at Watford Football Club. We've been at QPR prior to that, and then we moved in 2013 to what was then Allianz Park Stadium, and very recently it's been renamed Stonex Stadium. So that's the rugby side. For men, we've also got a semi-professional Saracens women's side, and then we've invested recently into Saracens Mavericks, which is a Vitality Netball Super League team. So that's the kind of scope of the organisation. In terms of what I do within that, I'm responsible as operations director for Stonex Stadium, which is a 10,000 seater stadium. We're in the middle of the Greenbelt in North London, and I'd probably like to describe that more as a kind of a boutique rather than a bowl stadium. And then my role within it is a leadership role that sits on the executive committee, so I oversee day-to-day operations. And I've always described myself as a generalist rather than a specialist, but as I say, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. So with that in mind, I sit across our operational strategy, our legal framework, our occupational health and safety. We look at cost control, HR principles and practice, our IT, our catering, our sustainability, but for the purpose of this, facility management as well. So just painting that picture from the outset that it is a broad scope.
I think yeah, that's definitely what it's all about, because it's like being an architect of many fields, and you're always in constant view of everything, and like being the law of the land kind of like perspective, and having like a mixture of your hands in every single pot kind of thing, which is like, I think that's what pretty much drives so much excitement and change to that respect. But in terms of like what you do in a day-to-day, how has like COVID pretty much impacted you in terms of like the day-to-day business and the operations, and then at the same time, like being somewhere of sports, like how has it impacted the people you actually host like your entertainment for?
Yeah, I suppose COVID's impacted everybody, so I assume most of the guys who are listening in now will be working in operations and FM, and everybody's had to adapt. I can't think of an organisation that wouldn't have had to adapt, whether or not it's a small corner shop supermarket all the way through to a huge enterprise organisation in the middle of town. And we've been fortunate in one way. So if we look at ourselves as a rugby team, the DCMS have been very clear on a kind of a 5-stage roadmap, whether or not it's taking you from sort of returning professional athletes into a training environment, through to a kind of stage 3 where we return to domestic competition. By that I mean we were able to play behind closed door games. And then in December we were actually allowed to bring some spectators back, and we did a pilot event. It's for 1,000 people, and it was under the Stage 5 guidance, which allowed the safe return of spectators. This was supported by the Sports Ground Safety Authority and some of their supplementary guidance, which covered off social distancing at sports grounds. And all that guidance is incredibly helpful. That gives you the framework in which you can operate in the right way at the right time. And that aligns nicely to the steps that have come in recently that the government have outlined, and we'll make sure that we're following those. So that, in terms of putting rugby back on the pitch, you've got that framework. But in terms of putting staff back into your office Monday to Friday, You've still got to factor that in. So our operational policies have been updated. We've worked with our medical staff. We've got a safety officer. I always say I've got great people around me, and it makes my life a lot easier. But we've had to implement change, and that's never easy. And people often don't like change. Some embrace it, others don't. But we've managed to get ourselves to a point where we're compliant and comfortable. We're lucky with the facilities we've got. I've got 16 boxes upstairs. When I say boxes, I mean like physical corporate boxes where you can see the pitch from. I'm sitting in one of them now. We've got 3 large hospitality lounges. So to socially distance and to manage capacities, it's been quite easy. To make sure that we manage who's on site and when, and that they can socially distance. So yeah, it's been challenging, but we're in a good place.
I think that's pretty good, because I think quality-wise, I think having those boxes has allowed you to get a little step ahead in terms of the spacing and measurements. But in terms of like reducing capacity, because you're having less when you went into your open mode where you had to reduce capacity to allow people to enter. But how did that actually change to the workforce, and did that also reduce in terms of how many people you needed on site during those events, or were you able to maintain the workforce as it was?
Yeah, if we looked at specifically, in answer to your question, a match day of the 1,000 people that came back for our pilot event, we're hoping that we'll be able to go to 2,000 in April for some of the new pilot events under the government plans to run that pilot, and then once we hit that step 4 in June, when we go into next season, we're hoping that we'll be in a position to welcome everyone back and have open our doors for a full crowd. But to your point, for 1,000 people, the challenge is with operating a match day and putting in anybody into the venue is we have to have a kind of consistent infrastructure. So if you're opening 3 entrances to a stadium, it doesn't matter if 5 people walk through or 5,000 people walk through. We still need to have that kind of infrastructure that ticks a few boxes on our compliance level. So whether or not that's the Sports Ground Safety Authority, or whether or not it's the Safety Advisory Group, or safety certificate on the venue, all of that needs to be covered, whether or not it's 1,000 people coming through or 10,000. So there's limited efficiencies to be had, but there are some, but it's not as much as you think. If you half your crowd, you don't half your operating costs, but vice versa. If you've got operating costs for 1,000 people, it is the same as if you're putting in a few more thousand as well. So it's been an interesting experience, and cost management has been critical throughout the last 12 months.
And then, so in terms of like when we look at like this cost management piece, like how has that severely changed in terms of like the way you run your operations now compared to, let's say, like 12 months back?
Yeah, so under the I'm focusing purely on match day at the moment, and I'll talk more about office environment as we move through. But in terms of a match day, it has changed because of the guidance that's come out. I won't go into huge amounts of detail, but we have to zone our stadium, and by that I mean we have a red, amber, and green zone, and this is across professional sport. Whether or not it's Emirates, Wembley, Twickenham, wherever it is, they're all taking this policy and overlaying it onto their venues. The red zone is basically reserved for those guys who've been PCR tested, so they will have tested negative for COVID, and they're allowed to continue in that environment. But it's protected at the same time from people who haven't been PCR tested from going in there. There may be 1 or 2 occasions where we need to get in there, and then we'll mitigate the risk with face masks, socially distancing. At what time do they go in there? So it becomes an active red zone 3 hours before kickoff. So everything we need to do in terms of facility prep and facility management, we'll make sure that it's completed either the day before or before that window comes in. The amber zone is once you get through our boundary line, so our security perimeter, and that's for all other staff that are required to run the game. And within the guidance, the DCMS guidance and the SGSA, it states how many people we can have on site, and it needs to be a minimum. Less people, less risk around COVID spread. And then the green zone is everywhere outside. So our car parks are accessible by public, and some of the green areas around the stadium it remains part of the green zone. And by green areas around the stadium, I mean the surrounding community fields. So yeah, we have changed. We have had to put different policies and operations in place, but it's utilising the same staff, but it's in giving them the skills and the training to make sure that we can execute and be successful.
Okay, I think that's pretty much like complex in terms of how this like differs from a normal office, because I think you have large open spaces, and then you also have to integrate the public and private areas that you have to allow like movement and free movement. So in terms of like what more has really like changed in terms of your day to day, how more do you see this like continue changing in terms of like in the near future once we do fully like go back open?
So there's two parts, and I suppose two things to get across here is one, yes, we are a professional rugby club and we operate on our field of play, and our primary product is putting fans in the stadium to watch that product and watch the team hopefully be successful. The second part is we run day to day, as you allude to, and I mentioned the spaces we've got, and effectively space is space in facilities. We've got the facility part of it, what doesn't move, and we've got the operational part of it is what moves through there. So we still need to tick the boxes around legislative compliance, excuse me, our PPM, both planned and reactive. So we know that the key elements around health and safety, our COSH, Legionella, our HVAC, we know all of that needs to happen. That happens at every venue. So we are different in the sense that we've got to deliver this product on the field, but we're also very, very similar to any hotel, leisure facility, office place. We will have people who utilise our boxes as an office space, for example, day to day, Monday to Friday. They'll come out of that box on a match day, and then we have to put it back. I don't know if you can see behind me or not, but we're in the process of knocking down our old West Stand, and we're putting in £25 million investment to build a stand similar to our East Stand. And within that, Middlesex University are going to occupy a lot of the space, and then that will allow us to have an educational facility on site, and it means that it's utilised Monday to Friday and not just the weekend. So we're sweating the asset as best as possible. We'll have events, we'll have weddings, we'll go back to some sort of normality in time when social distancing and government measures are relaxed.
Okay, well, there's so much change incoming as well then for you in all areas. I think in terms of like where you are today, it's been like, you know what you're doing, you've got your hats on and you change them in around as you're moving around your building and your site. But how if we take this back, like how did you actually end up where you are today, and you know where did your journey begin, like within the FM space?
Yeah, I think my background has always been around sport and events and operations, and I think I mentioned we obviously moved to this stadium in 2013, and what actually happened at the time was my role within Saracens there was about making sure that the community was able to use the facility. We've got an artificial pitch which allows anyone to train on it Monday to Friday. We were very much shouting keep on the pitch rather than keep off the pitch, so we're quite unique compared to any other sporting venue with that regards. And then I have some pride in my own house, like anyone else would, and what I felt was this is almost my second home, the stadium, and it was alarming how quickly it was depreciating within the first year. And at the time, the senior management in place, there was an opportunity presented around when our previous FM manager left, and I spoke through some of the analysis that I suggested we did and where we needed to get to, and we looked at what we actually have in place from an FM perspective, what we actually do, and then more importantly, what are we supposed to do? What's the legislation? What are our minimum standards criteria? What are the laws around health and safety, and are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? So where were the gaps? We then looked at, and then did we have the skills and the staff to fill those gaps, and what was the cost? So we went through a zero budgeting process. So I took on all that, and what it ultimately led to is me taking on the post of operations director across the business, but it really started with sorting out our FM. And it was almost by accident that it came across. It was just in pride in what we do that whilst we were doing some of it, we just needed to raise our game, and we did that quite quickly. We restructured divisions. One of the big things for us was we utilised the apprenticeship levy, which we pay into, and that ensured that all our operational staff who were involved in facilities, they were doing their IWFM level 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There was something there for all of them, and it was a good use of our apprenticeship levy at the right time. We stripped back our budget and we made sure that it was right. And by stripped back, I don't mean the total cost. I mean, what is it that we're doing? Our actual costs went up quite a lot, but now it's consistent. It's sort of 3 to 5% increase year on year, not including utilities because some things are out of our control. We introduced some basic CAFM around putting some software in place to make sure the guys could issue tickets, and the completion rates went up and the standards went up and our PPM boxes were ticked. So by introducing that, I was given more opportunity, and the opportunity grew, and I found myself in a situation that I was really loving, really enjoying, and still do today.
So, like that passion kind of, where did the passion kind of arise for you to be so interested in the built environment? Like from that perspective, I think you having an eye for appreciation to what you saw, and then, you know, stepping into wanting to make a change. Like where did that kind of like drive you like from?
Yeah, I think it's if nothing changes, nothing changes. So if we wanted to carry on with the dilapidated facility that lasted brand new, all spick and span, in 5 years, we were like, it was going to cost us millions to get this back to where it should be. I think it was pride. So you want to come into an environment that's as best as it possibly can be, and you want to be the best version of yourself in that environment. So FM is, for me, if you can create that environment, not just for yourself, but for those around you, you're only going to have an environment that people thrive. And if they're thriving, you're successful, you enjoy your work, and you basically love your day to day. And that's just such a small thing from making sure the walls are painted. There's no holes here, and everything works. The lighting works, the HVAC's spot on, you've got the right humidity, the purification of the air, etc. I can go on, but if you can get it all right, and a lot of the time this stuff sits in the background and people don't realise, and I always refer to kind of FM as kind of substance over style, and occasionally the style comes in, but if you can get the substance right and you're kind of sitting there and making sure everything works, people will appreciate it.
Definitely. I think it's something that's quite like such a common and high focus now, especially like with most people working from home, and flexibility from like not being in an office workspace or your traditional workspace. So I think that's definitely something that's now like something we're more attuned to, and then something that we're more aware of, to understanding how it makes us feel and the impact it has on like the day to day. So in terms of like with your career as it's been building up from the start at Saracens, how have you then been approaching and learning as you've continued to grow and as you've continued to like move sites? Because I believe you moved from 3 sites, including Wakefield and Enfield. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I go back a while. We've had offices in Watford, we've been at the University of Hertfordshire, we've then moved to the stadium, which is here now in Hendon, as you said at the beginning. But prior to that, we've been using QPR, Loftus Road, and then we spent most of our time as a professional club at Vicarage Road, which is home to Watford Football Club, until we moved here in 2013. So I haven't been involved in FM at all of those sites, and a lot of it has been rented spaces. But when we came here, it was the first time we had our own asset as such, and it's made a huge difference, both to our fans and to staff, just to have somewhere to call home.
So you've sort of gone from not being in the FM hack to then, you know, just putting it on yourself and then driving that for your team and like your business, like to, you know, get the outcomes you've actually saw and built up on. Is that how it's like developed over time?
Yeah, I think I always say that if you can identify an issue, don't just say it's an issue. If you can do something to find and offer a solution, you're going to put yourself in a better position both to develop your career and to help others. And that's pretty much what happened. I identified an issue and we addressed it. It wasn't a small piece of work, but I was fortunate enough to have good staff around me, like I said, positive people and productive people, and we invested in them, and we invested in their training as well through IWFM.
And then during this time that you've brought together your teams, and then you've been moving from site to site, building on opportunities and growing, and finding those loopholes that needed change. So what would you say are highlights from these areas that have stood out for you, and that you kind of relayed back to learn from, and like to let people know today, what would be your takeaways to give them from that time?
I think in terms of highlights, for me, we've had on the pitch, we've been successful. We've had some issues in the last 12 months that we're hopefully now on a road of recovery of. And personally, in the past, myself and my staff have been recognised by Premiership Rugby for commitment to rugby. We've had parliamentary awards, but it's less about that. And I think it's Dolly Parton who said, if you want the rainbow, you have to put up with the rain. And we've certainly had a few tough times. Parking, some people on here will be aware of it, others won't. Parking a salary cap issue that we had. We had other issues, and this FM one that I've said to you before about a dilapidating stadium was one of the big bits of work. And whilst you might not see it as a highlight, actually overcoming that success and bringing it to a point where we're really, really proud of has been incredibly enjoyable and incredibly rewarding. So that's one, I would say. But also the last 12 months, which is coming slightly away from FM and more operational, is the COVID situation, and it's been hugely crippling. I cannot say that we are alone in that. There's businesses all over the world, and certainly in the UK, that won't have survived, and others that are in survival mode to get through it. And we would put ourselves in survival mode at the moment. And we will come out better. As I said, we've got a new West Stand. We're going to be leaner, we're going to be smarter, we're going to be more efficient. And that's can only be a good thing. So whilst we may have peaked previously, we're now on the way back up. So that's exciting as well. And I know it's quite recent, but I'd certainly say that where I've been influential and with many people helping me over the last 12 months has been a highlight for me in a bittersweet way.
I think especially that connection with the teams behind Saracens as well. Like you mentioned, like the netball team and rugby teams, and with the foundation coming up and the education space, how do you see those spaces continue to improve, now when they come out of lockdown, but in terms of how do you see them changing? Do you see them anything new and different, or is it going to just continue as you were before, but with just more security around it?
Yeah, I think everybody's always wanting to learn something. I think learning never ends, does it? I mean, you want to be the best version of yourself, and if you can pick something up daily or weekly or whatever it is that you're learning, you're always going to take it away and you're going to be better. So I would never see any of those, whether or not it's Mavericks, our women's team, our men's team, or all our office staff and team behind the team, the things people don't see. So that we're not going to regress. We're just going to be smarter. I'm going to say your last mistake is your best teacher. We're all going to make mistakes, but we've had to be very, very switched on throughout the last 12 months, both to be sustainable as a business, and two, to be in a position that when fans do come back and when our space is open for hospitality and weddings and conferences, that we're in our best possible place. And we've been fortunate enough to work with companies like Serco, who are our cleaning contractor. They work through, they've been incredibly flexible, they've adapted to our needs, our times that we've needed them to increase their input into site, whether or not it's cleaning before an event, during an event and after an event. They've been been outstanding, and we've got a hygiene partner through Rentokil Initial as well that has invested in their technology to make sure that they can manage COVID. So we are putting ourselves on a facility perspective in the best possible way, so that whether or not it's rugby, netball, or just day-to-day business, that we're safe, secure, and ready to go when some sort of normality comes back.
And then, so when you've got you mentioned earlier that there was like the apprenticeship schemes that you had, and then for your workforce itself, how much of your workforce has come from, like, let's say for apprenticeship schemes or learning opportunities that have, like, that you see thriving today as part of your team?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wouldn't be able to give you an exact number, but let me try and paint you a picture. So the culture at Saracens is incredible, both for the players, but also for the guys who aren't part of that day-to-day training group. So by that I mean our backroom staff, our marketing, our operations, our facilities, HR, etc. All those guys have created this culture, and it's based on 4 key values, really. So honesty, discipline, work rate, and humility, and that's what drives our day-to-day. And if we have something to kind of shape us, it really, really brings us together, and it creates a culture where people don't want to leave. And I said in 2013, the guys who started in FM, we've had some attrition. Of course, every business has some, but I wouldn't say it's on a par with normal. I'd say we're below normal. We have staff, as I said, we invest in. So a lot of the guys did their apprenticeships and their level 2s to level 5s while on the job. So they're already here, and we were trying to help with their CPDs and make sure that they're growing as individuals, and as they grow as individuals, we grow as a business. As we grow as a business, they grow their salaries. So it's reflective and fair, and everybody benefits. So it's been a really, really nice journey to be part of.
Yeah, I think the upskilling is a crucial part, and I think it's very good and evident that as your team continues to grow, they continue to add more value to both their day-to-day and then to what they do, and then that's reflected on the results you're able to achieve. So with that said, how, like, for you personally, how do you kind of approach like new starters in terms of like, do you have like general advice you give to them as soon as from day one, this is how you're going to hit the ground running, or like what's your approach, and then what's your advice into people that are starting like from scratch from this?
Yeah, I mean, for us within a business, if they're successful with their job, our onboarding gives them an opportunity to understand the direction and expectations, and whether or not you're employed or not. If you have expectations and goals, I think it's important that you are realistic with them, and that you're not trying to do them too quickly. It's certainly not going to come overnight. I think from my personal experience working with Saracens and some of the other businesses I've been involved before, I've worked in athletics and temporary structures, and I've realised over time that maybe where I've headed up part of that business, I've been quite siloed and been component focused rather than more of a holistic approach to the organisation, and that would be one word of advice. I'd say, look, see the organisation as a whole, although you may only be doing a small part. How does that fit into the bigger picture? And if you don't understand the bigger picture, you don't really understand what you're part of, and that has management responsibility and not just the individual. And then the other point I just wanted to bring up was I always find driving change is not easy. You mentioned it a couple of times, and it's part of the vision from IWFM is to drive change for the future. And I love that. Of course, I want to drive change for the future. And you kind of think, right, I'm doing this because it's good for the business, or we're going to change that because we think it will be better. But actually, when you've got to bring on that journey kind of 200 people, if you don't empower them, you don't engage them with that journey from the beginning, you don't create urgency, you do. It's just not going to take traction, and you're not going to have any success, or success will be difficult because you've just gone down the road by yourself. And that understanding of change, and I think if I was younger and I look back at myself, I would probably say go away and understand change management better before you go and start making changes. So it's an academic thing, and you can look at Cotter's 8 steps and things like that. So, but if you can understand what you're trying to do and some of the academic sort of theories behind it, I think it would only help people be successful in driving that change.
Okay. So, like, if we're talking to your younger you, taking this back now to be more specific, the industry within like FM, you've got the many views of what you see as, you know, the engineering side, commercial side, security, the actual like space management and change. Like, how would you like point out and then kind of direct like a new starter to say, you know, if you want to grow into a specific area, how should you approach it, or what you should think about before you want to say, you know, I want to be, you know, head of security rather to the head of space planning? How would you like rephrase that for them to like do something and then like rephrase it there?
So it's a journey, isn't it? That you would expect. You would expect that you would have some competencies between year 0 through to year 1, 2, 3, and you might break that down into 3 months and quarters. And if you can demonstrate that you wanted to achieve this by period 3 of year 1, then you're breaking down. And I think I always remember someone saying to me, "How do you eat an elephant?" And I was just like, "What are you on about?" And he just said, "One mouthful at a time." And I think that's life, really, isn't it? You just take one step at a time. And if someone can give you that direction and where you need to go to, I think that's critical. And sometimes you will have to do it yourself, and that's difficult because most people are looking for a manager or guidance or a leader. And sometimes you have to do that yourself. And managing up has always been something that I enjoy doing, and I would probably always encourage others to look at. And if you're not getting help, then certainly help yourself.
Definitely. So I think that's like taking that leap of faith that then takes you, obviously with the risk and reward, is that opportunity comes where you go, I mean, you search for it and find it.
Correct.
So yeah, I think it's a space where, as people continue like journeying and learning over this, like the last 12 months, it's been like sudden change, and we've been thrown into, you know, chaos and dramatized like so many spaces and areas. How do you continue, like what kind of continue motivates you every single day to like actually, you know, you're thrown into change that where we are right now, but you know, like what's your like bigger picture where you always look at before you go into the office and say, you know, I'm going to go out there, these are my goals, and I'm still going to go after them given the circumstances, but you still go out and there and achieve them?
So if I kind of strip it back, I'm fortunate enough that I sit across our strategy as well. So as I said from the beginning, I'm a generalist, but I know that I need a facility that's outstanding to achieve our group vision, which is to be the most innovative, high-performing and caring sport and entertainment organisation in the world. And as I mentioned before, we've got some values that go with that. And if I know that every time I write an email or every time I send one of our FM guys out to fix the air conditioning, it's driving towards that kind of high-performing sport and business excellence. And we know that it's going to create a position where it's going to enhance our brand, and we're going to be able to hit some of the business objectives that are set and expected by our board. Then that's what motivates me. And I mean, you could argue that I'm trying to be a people pleaser, but it's certainly not that, because we've created a culture here that all our staff are buying into that, and they understand that the vision exists, and they understand that the objectives of the business are there to make sure that we're successful as a team, not as individuals. And that's where that kind of holistic approach that I spoke about earlier is really, really important. And I kind of wish that I knew that in hindsight when I was a little bit younger, rather than just trying to be incredibly good at what I do, but also at the same time make sure that I'm bringing the rest of the organisation not necessarily with me, but we're going on the journey together.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because I think bringing like if you're thinking about a big machine, you need every single working part to work together. Especially like if we're talking about rugby teams or netball teams, you have each person that has, you know, their specialist like areas, and then once we have those all together, it's what, you know, it's what makes a difference and continues like making things happen. So I think that's pretty much like team and community that you build is what actually drives change. And I think it's like over time we get through like stages of life, like as we are right now, and this that motivation from, you know, from leadership and from like starters that, you know, connecting each other, and basically you, I'm assuming you've, how has that been for the staff members? Like, have you opened up opportunities for people to like comment how they're feeling and then how they're developing over these times?
Yeah, we have, in short. We undertake what's called a pulse check. It's a survey that goes out to our all our staff every 8 weeks, and it allows us to understand kind of where they're feeling, where they're at. We ask questions about what 3 words would describe the way you're feeling currently. We collect that data, and then we look at, are we improving from where we were, or have we dropped off in terms of standards? So it's relatively new. I won't lie. We brought that in during COVID because a lot of people were working from home, and some people have huge families, and other people are living by themselves in a flat. And you think, oh well, I'm okay, but actually, are they? And this gives us opportunity to understand where individuals are at, and allows us to make decisions, most importantly, about what do we do moving forward. And one that came out of the previous pulse check survey was about well-being and mental health, and we've since introduced step count challenges where we're in teams of 5 and 10 people, and we're doing as many steps as we can, and we're adding together, and then we'll have a all-staff video call on a Monday that has 50, 60 people on it, and you're reading out how many steps a team of 5 have done, and you wouldn't believe how competitive it gets. And it's been really, really enjoyable. And on top of that, we've got fitness challenges. We've got dance sessions on a Wednesday morning if people want to be active, and it's been really interesting to see how agile the business has been, and it's been so far. We'll get our pulse check survey actually relatively soon to see what success we've had from that.
That sounds brilliant. I think you've really turned that around, and you've actually started, like, it sounds like you've built like a bigger community, even though some of you are away from the office. I think talking about technology a bit more, and then like the future at the same time with the workforce, like what do you see, and then what's currently like on your to-do list where you're talking about, you know, what's the technology implementations we're going to be looking at to like involve in, and then if there's anything that you're going to do different that's like coming up with when the workforce returns back to the office like properly, and then what changes are like imminently in your space?
Yeah, so I won't go super technical or anything on this, I promise, but because we're investing a lot of money into a new West Stand, it's given us opportunities to reflect on the technology in site. So the technology on site is only as good as our network as such, but everything's going to sit on that, and that's everything from our CCTV, access control, our BMS, our building management system, our day-to-day staff who are on their IT, our Wi-Fi network, and then within that we've also got kind of AV and video distribution. So by that I mean IPTV that most big venues will have, and on their stadium, allowing you to control digital signage. And then we obviously, for our match days, we have our big screens as well. So we've got a production element around our match days. So there's a huge amount of tech within a stadium. But in terms of what we've actually had to adjust to, will we be going over the top and putting a load of tech in around COVID? Possibly, but possibly not at the same time. I think that will be dictated to us by government guidance, and as I mentioned, the Sports Ground Safety Authority. What we're looking at is actually creating a connected stadium that allows people to come and have a digital experience on and off site. So where we've been able to be fortunate, and I've mentioned about agile business previously, is where our games have been played behind closed doors, we now stream our games, so you can watch them from home. And for anyone who's a Wolfpack member on our Saracens website, which is free, you can watch those games, whether or not it's men's or women's. And when you look at some of the viewing figures, and I'll give you an example around the women's games. If we had a Saracens women's fixture on site, typically we were getting 200, 300, maybe 400 people would turn up to the stadium. Now we put it on a streaming platform, you're actually now looking at 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people that are watching. So our audience growth has been massive through this digital time. And without the technology to do that, and I know it sounds basic that we're putting a camera in and we're streaming it, but it's actually quite a strong product offering in terms of the production around it. It's multiple cameras, and it gives us that opportunity to get our product into homes when people can't get to our product physically. So that technology has been great, and our networks allowed us to do that. And our job now as a business is, right, well, we've grown that audience. Now, how do we leverage the audience once COVID comes away? So how do we get people to convert from watching the stream product into physically coming to watch a game? And looking at some of the surveys and the data that's coming out, it does look like there's a huge amount of demand for people to want to go back to sporting events, and we'll create a facility that's safe to do that. And if that involves technology, great, but I suspect it's going to involve behaviours, social distancing, and some policy delivery. So yeah, in terms of technology, we've got plenty kind of that everybody else is thinking of and doing, but then on top of that, we've got the production element of streaming our games.
And then so that interactive, like kind of like view of it, I think the anticipation of well, it sounds like you're going to be expecting a lot more people coming back than you had originally as spectators. I think,
well, and certainly hope so.
And then so I think that kind of like that makes me think about, you know, how we anticipate how we're going to react to having even more people than we used to. But then again, you know, you're going to offer like you're building out this new space, and then is there anything that's kind of like that's now sprung up in your mind, or that is already in the works, that's kind of just like during the COVID time to thought about, oh, we should also include this, as it's going to add a bit more value to the, you know, the experience for our spectators once they come on site?
I think there's been not just at Saracens, but in the world of sport, there's been a lot of creativity and innovation, and I appreciate that's a key driver for a lot of businesses, is the ability to innovate and adapt. And there's been some stadiums where they've done in-seat service, so they've used an application to order their food and it gets delivered to their seats, which works well when you're under some restrictions. So where you've got less people in the seats, it allows people to move through the seats that aren't being used to deliver food. Now, if you fill the stadium again, to actually then deliver food becomes more of a challenge. But they're the sort of things that we're thinking about. We've got new stands, new hospitality. Would you be sitting in your seat with a little screen next to you that allows you to watch the replay and you can review what's happened, and similar to being at home having Sky or BT or whatever it is watching a game, you can flick to that quickly and see the highlights as well, and on your phone. So app integrations, certainly something that will grow at Saracens and has grown across the sports industry for the last couple of years.
So am I expecting to be able to order a hot dog through a little drone at some point during the game? That sounds something that's possible?
We can do that if we need to do that, yeah.
Oh, that's been brilliant. Cool. Well, thank you for that all. I think it's been a picture of what everything's been happening. Is like there's so many changes, and I think it sounds like such an exciting space in your work line. I think in terms of like Saracens as your, like, is it your club as well? Like, do you're a Saracens? Would you consider yourself that?
I have to. Am I a fan as well as an employee? I think we all are, really. But I'm a golfer and footballer as well, so I'm multi-sports. I think I'm a fan of sport generally, and just the power it has and the ability to impact socially, impact commercially, and just basically enhance life.
And then, so I think one more question before we wrap up in this. thinking about like the industry and the sports industry, like for yourself as in the facility management space, where we look at sports, and like, do you feel like there is any difference to the way community and spectators are going to react once they return back to being able to like be on site, watch a game, or actually even just participate in a game? Like, do you foresee anything that you might have to like change in like as we phasely like allow people to come back into like spaces?
It's difficult for me to answer that. I'd almost be better off flipping it and answering you if and asking you the question. That I know that coming to this stadium will be COVID secure and COVID safe, because we've done all the risk assessments, we've done all the actions required, and there's very little more we can do. Government data and decisions will shape that, but ultimately the decision to turn up to a game is going to be one with the fans. If we can provide a venue that talks about air purification, hand sanitisation, social distancing, and we've used UV filter, UV cleaning. If you do everything you can do and you provide an environment that is safe and secure, I don't see any reason why spectators wouldn't want to come back to the venue.
I think, yeah. I personally, can't wait till anything opens up just so I can run into it and get involved. But I think that's a wrap for us, and thank you for everything that you've like let us know. I think one of the key things I know that for me is understanding that these spaces and the changing times are adding to everything that we've learned so far to date, and that everything around us has continued to change and drive like more space to actually look at, you know, what's different, what continues to be like needing to like to continue changing. I think one more thing that is also just more of an insight for me is I say is more, you sound like you've always kind of just, you know, you have this picture in your head of wanting to like make the world a better place, in terms of, you know, you see a change and you want to make it happen. In terms of like where we are today and the world and how it's continued to like cope with the situations that we have, what's like the one key advice that you kind of you would give to me if I wanted to say, I want to be involved in the built environment, and I would like to, I'm not really sure in terms of the direction by where to start, but what would be the first step I should take if I'm a uni student and I wanted to like get involved? Like what's the first step?
I think those guys who are coming out of university and younger, and I think it's no secret that they've probably been hit the hardest off the back of COVID, and I'd certainly the guys who've been impacted through our organisation. I think there's the word I've been using is just be patient, because this is going to boom, and opportunity is going to come back to sport, and the ability to have a career in sport is a privilege, and at times it's a luxury as well. But if you're going to enjoy it, if you want to enjoy going to work in sport, in terms of getting on the ladder and getting in, there will be a lot of opportunities coming up. And if you've already been to university, and you don't necessarily need to have gone to university to work in sport, but there's opportunities for apprenticeships and volunteering and work experience, etc. But reach out to the organisations. When people reach out to us and ask, rather than waiting for a job advert, it's always well received, and we certainly expect to be going through a cycle whereby we will grow and we will not have capacity to deal with that growth, and when that happens, we'll be reaching out for outstanding individuals that we want to bring on board.
Okay, well, I'll share that out. So thank you again for your like participating in this, and again, it's been really insightful. As I mentioned, this actually forms part of the Turbulent Time series, and this will be you can actually review this in the IWFM Insight Hub. There's also dedicated content there for you to review research reports, practice guides, and actually industry information in regards to the latest government changes. One of the things that we would say to actually get involved and actually provide some voice is to get involved with the Pay and Prospect Survey for 2021. I think this is especially an area where, for new starters, where they would, like people from university, would be looking to gauge, what's their understanding of this industry and what to look for in terms of pay, and understand like the complexity behind them. And that's somewhere to actually like get a look at. Secondly, also just some resources into the current climate is about COVID. We've got a section dedicated to resources on COVID-19. And if you need like some guidance, or you're starting to look at changes that you want to implement in your working facility, there is also more information there for you. And to end things off, this is also the series we are looking to continue growing, and it is we're looking for people within the capital, within London. And if you're interested in taking part, please reach out and do get in touch. We will continue to have more content rolling out over time coming, and bringing you more people like Richard, and to share their stories and their insights into what the day-to-day is, and in how we are actually, rising up to the challenges that come across, and in how we will continue to persevere in the future. So thank you again, Richard, for joining us, and thank you all.